Germany, we have a little bit of a special situation, I guess, because we have in Germany 4 different transmission grid operators. I guess in most countries is just one. So in Germany we have 4. Yeah, and the transmission grid in Germany consists of mainly power lines in an extra high voltage level, so it's 220 and 380 kV. And we at Amprion have a special department that deals with the topics of nature conservation and environmental planning. That's also where I'm working, and my main topics are on the integrated vegetation management and bird protection, so that's why I'm here today. And what is also very important, and more important during the last years, are the aspects of sustainability. And these are our main fields of action here I'd like to show you. It's about corporate management, secure of power system, employees, environment and society and customers. But for my presentation here, those 2 are the most important, because as you can see here again, it's about the secure power system but also the topic environment. So this is what we are talking about here today. And down there you can see those 3 bullet points: species protection, nature conservation, and resource conservation. And of course, when we're talking about species protection, it's very much about bird protection here when we talk about power lines. So we already heard about the bird protection markers. And in the German, especially in the German transmission grid, we find 2 different types of bird flight diverters or bird protection markers. Those 2 on the upper corner. And as you can see, it was a discussion before, they are black and white. It's somehow agreed, I guess, in Germany that this is the most effective, those are the most effective colors if you bring them together, of course, not just black or white, but always in combination. So in the distribution grid, you can sometimes also find other types of markers, I guess in some rare cases also in the transmission grid, but these are basically the main types. And as you can see on the other 2 pictures here, what we're doing, we are usually mounting those Rebe markers or flag markers by a helicopter. And those spiral markers up there, they can also be mounted during the ground wire is pulled on the pylons. When you build up a new line in the process of pulling the ropes, you can put on these kinds of markers. So this is like a very main difference between those 2 types for us. Okay, yeah, of course, these protection markers are commonly used measure to reduce bird collision on power lines. And yeah, for new power line projects, the mounting of these markers can be a permitting condition for us. In areas where it's very likely to happen that there are collision risks or a lot of collision risks, then it's very common that we put up those bird protection markers on the underground, not underground, on the ground wires. Okay. One thing that is special in Germany, I think, is that the Federal Agency for Nature Conservation developed a scientific method that can be used to determine a collision risk for a power line project. So in this method, it's basically compared, you have to look at your project, how dangerous can my project be, how high are the pylons, for example, or is it a new power line, or am I just putting new ropes on or new cables on an existing power line? And then you compare it to the bird species you have around. Like how far are the breeding sites away, what kind of species do appear in those breeding sites, and how prone are they to collision. So they try to make different categories and put the birds in different categories. And then you have, you can compare this, and then you have a result and can check if it's necessary to mount those bird protection markers on your power line, or if even, this can also be a result of this, that even the mounting of bird protection devices is not enough to have a safe power line for the birds. And then you have to come up with some more ideas on bird protection for your line. Okay, this is an example picture for why we are only marking our grounding wire, but yeah, it was mentioned in the talk before. You can see here that the conductors in our grid are usually mounted in bundles of 4 or 2 conductors or conducting wires, and they are pretty good visible. I guess you can see this in those pictures. Those are very common pylon types for the German transmission grid. But as you can see here, the underground wires on top, especially in those bad light conditions, are the lines that are problematic. So what's important for us about those diverters or protection markers? Very important for us is that they are effective and approved. So when we have a problem, or it seems for a new power line that there is a high collision risk for the existing species, the nature conservation agencies accept those flight diverters as a working measure. So this is very important. And on the other hand, it's important that it's technically feasible to mount these markers. So as I said, we are using a helicopter. I guess there are different solutions for different TSOs. Everyone has like its own way of mounting. But what you still have to keep in mind when we talk about these diverters is that for the companies, for example, we have to do a regular inspection. So at Amprion, each year we check if everything's fine with the markers, and if not, we have to replace them. Yeah, as I said, replacement in case of damage is necessary. Yeah, and the installation can be very complex sometimes, as we had. Sometimes you have to switch off the power lines, which can take several months of planning ahead if you want to switch off a whole line. Yeah, and mounting of markers for us should only take place in areas where the risk of bird collision is really high, and so that it can have a significant impact on the species there. So we want to avoid that we have like markers put all over the grid, but maybe there are no species prone to collision, because still there is, even if the markers are put on the line, there is still some work and some things you have to think about. I just want to mention this shortly. We already heard a lot about electrocution, because it's not really a TSO topic in Germany, and I guess it is also was clear in the talk before that it's more interesting for the DSOs maybe, but I just want to mention it that in Germany, in the Federal Nature Conservation Act, there is a special law on this topic that is about protection of birds on overhead power lines, and that is necessary to improve the pylons so that electrocution cannot happen, basically. So I just wanted to show that in Germany this is put down in the law. Okay, one other thing that we are doing at Amprion, or did in the past years, is the mounting of nesting aids. And we just found that this can be useful for various reasons. So we have like a set of maybe 10 or 12 bird species that are commonly nesting on pylons in Germany. A lot of like rooks, crows, sometimes storks, but not very often, I guess. But also kestrels and peregrine falcons. And those are the 2 species that we developed this nesting aids for. And yeah, it's one positive fact is that installation of this nesting aids can prevent nests on dangerous places on the pylon. So this way we can somehow control where the bird is breeding. Yeah, and the nest cannot block like important areas on our pylons. So this is, I would say, positive for us as a grid operator and for the bird. So, but why did we have a custom-made nesting box? Because there are several types of this on the market. But what we found out is that they were not really easy to mount on the pylons. That was one problem. So now we have here a version that is specifically fitted to our pylons. And it is made of very durable material. They are made of metal. And one question we get really often is about the heat development, if it gets really hot or really cold in this kind of nesting aids. And we did some tests on that and compared them on with other nesting boxes that are on the market. And we found out that there is no big difference in the temperature. And the next 2 projects I'd like to show you is also about bird protection, but in a bit of another way. So here is a project that we are together with the other German TSOs, some DSOs, working with the RGI and NABU. I guess it's already running since 2017 for quite a while. And this is a project where citizens can report bird carcass that they found near or underneath power lines. And then on a website of the NABU, this data is shown. Yeah. And our aim is that to gather data, and that will help us to understand the risk for bird species, to check if we maybe have special areas in our grid where a lot of collisions happen, or where we maybe didn't put up the protection markers yet. So improve our measures on bird protection, basically. But what I think is another really important factor of this project is the exchange we have from the grid operators, RGI, and of course the NABU here, because we're bringing together the experts talking with the grid operators. And in this group, it already developed, I guess, a lot over the last years. In 2022, RGI organized a big conference on this topic. I guess, Liam, you will talk about this later, so I'm skipping this here a bit. And since this year, we are also having a working group that's dealing with bird protection markers and how we can improve bird protection markers in Germany. And in this group, there are sitting together the NABU, but also the technicians from the different TSOs and DSOs, to see what is needed, basically. Okay, another project where Amprion is taking part is the Eurokite project that launched in 2019. It's an EU LIFE project on conservation of birds of prey. Yeah, I was asked about the pros and cons when transmission grid operators are performing this kind of measures. So what we found about during the last years is our main conclusions are that if we are doing or installing protection devices or performing protection measures, we need to be sure that they are technically safe and tested as far as it's possible. Because at one point, we know you have to put some marker, for example, on a line and see how it's going, of course. But there are some tests, some necessary tests you can do before in a laboratory, for example. And before we can put something up on our line or underneath our towers, or else we have to make sure that it's safe. And if possible, we also need to make sure that it's effective, at least as far as you can test it before. And what we also found is that discussions with experts are very crucial in order to develop those effective measures. Because if we just think about what is working for us as a TSO, maybe it's not as effective as we are talking with experts like ornithologists or people that are dealing more with the topic on bird protection, for example. And on the other hand, it's also very important to get into exchange about knowledge and experiences and new ideas. So we found out that it's important to talk like with external experts, but it can also be pretty good to just talk with other grid operators, because maybe they're using another protection device. So you can talk about your experiences and your ideas. So I think here those exchange and discussion is really a key thing we need to do. Okay, so yeah, that was my talk. Thank you. Thank you for listening.